Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our ballistics ID, evidence IQ, ballistics IQ, summer school event, or as Dr. Bolton-King has come to call it, our ballistics IQ showcase. This is intended for instructors, academic professors, people who have our system, are new, that haven't used it a good deal. I think we have just about everybody that I knew that was coming. So I think we can go ahead and get started. I don't have much in the way of an introduction, other than just to say that we're very fortunate to have Dr. Rachel Bolton-King, who is, I don't know the time over there in the UK, but it's either afternoon or evening. And Dr. Eric Law from Oklahoma, who will both be presenting today. You won't have to suffer my voice too much today. I'm going to turn things over to their capable hands. The only plan I have to moderate is if there are questions, we can probably have a few minutes at the end, and we can post those in the chat, and I'll just encourage I'll keep an eye on that and moderate from that standpoint. I hope everyone's having a great summer. I know a lot of people have gone back to school. A lot of programs have started up again, and we still have the rest of hurricane season to get through down here in Florida. But welcome, sincerely. I'm glad to have everyone here. And I'm not sure who's speaking first, but I know that the person who got voted will pick up the mic. Thanks again.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I mean, both of us are gonna split this summer school between us. So both of us use the ballistics IQ software and the imaging hardware very similarly. And so Eric's going to start off by showing you some of the work and the way that he uses ballistics IQ with his students. And then I'm going to build on from him halfway through the session and cover some of the kind of slightly newer ways that ballistics IQ can offer learning opportunities for our students, and also then link in with another kind of training tool that you may or may not have heard about that might be able to, again, sort of strengthen the work that you're doing in terms of investigating firearms and using ballistics IQ. But again, sort of Eric and I both utilize these. So I will hand over to him without taking any of his valuable time.
Thank you, Rachel. So I'm Eric Law. I teach at the University of Central Oklahoma. I teach firearms and an advanced firearms course. So I use this software pretty extensively to help kind of teach firearms. I'm going to kind of talk through how I use it and kind of some important use case scenarios that you all may find this software to be useful for. Rachel, do you want to advance the slide? Okay. So we have a very basic kind of scenario set up here where we had a shooting between police and two members of a crime gang. So we've recovered a couple of cartridge cases from the crime scene. We have a Glock 19 pistol that's been recovered that we want to try to test fire in the lab, and we want to try to compare that test fire to those crime scene cartridge cases to try to see if we can identify the crime scene cases back to that Glock 19, or figure out that maybe a different firearm was used to fire those particular cases. And that happened, this will be important later, but this crime that we're going to talk about initially for this first portion happened 4 days ago on Sunday on August 10th. And then we had a police officer that was wounded, so officer-involved shooting. We really want to try to figure out who these cartridge cases belong to. They were all imaged by the ballistics IQ system, and then we're going to talk through some of the software uses for what you can do to analyze those cartridge cases after they've been scanned. Let me see if I can share my screen now. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, perfect. All right, so here we have kind of a subset of these cartridge cases. I have 3 of them in here just as kind of what I'm going to use for these examples to walk you through after they've been imaged by the ballistics IQ, what we can do software-wise to try to link them together. The map here, Rachel's going to talk more about the map and kind of case linkage, what we can do there. So you can kind of ignore the map for the moment, but we can see the location was in California, which is kind of fits with the scenario that we had. So these were recovered in California, test fired in California, entered into the ballistics IQ in California, right? So you can see that location on the map there. On the side panel over here, we have the 3 cartridge cases. And just to walk you through how they're named for this portion of the example, so we have TF01 for test fire 1. That's the cartridge case that was test fired by the known firearm, the Glock 19. And then we have 2 question cartridge cases. Question 1, which is 1 cartridge case in the crime scene. We want to know what gun that came from. And then we have question 2, which is a 2nd cartridge case in the crime scene. We also want to know what gun that cartridge case came from. Right, so our question at the moment is, were question 1 and question 2 either both fired by the same gun as this one, or was maybe one fired by that gun, or neither were fired by that gun, right? That's the question we kind of want to answer here at the beginning. So I'm going to walk you through the virtual comparison microscopy portion of the software. This is mainly how I use the Ballistics IQ software in my firearms course. And just to set the stage a little bit for the usefulness of the virtual comparison software, we're pretty fortunate at the University of Central Oklahoma here that we have 4 comparison microscopes. Some have been donated by crime labs, some we've purchased over the years. But my firearms course routinely is 15 to 20 students. So 4 comparison scopes still isn't enough for what I kind of want to do to teach students how to do comparisons. It's not feasible financially or lab space wise to have a comparison scope for every student, but I really want every student to be able to get that experience doing comparisons. Right, so Ballistics IQ software is really the only way to actually effectively do that, where students can get one-on-one time essentially with a comparison scope without having to purchase or acquire or use physical comparison microscopes. Right, we really have a lot of the same controls, and there are some actual cool things that the software does here that you can't really do so easily on a scope that actually makes this better in a sense. All right, so I'm going to walk through an example here with test fire 1. And we're going to start with the first question cartridge case. All right, so I'm going to kind of compare these, and I'll walk you through some of the software controls for trying to see if we think question 1 was fired by the same gun as test fire 1, right, that Glock 19, or fired by some different gun. So I filtered this by the case number up here, which is 2025-0810, right? So I filtered that by the case number. And I'm going to select these cases and click compare images, and that's going to bring up the virtual comparison microscopy viewer. All right, so going to show both of our cartridge cases here on these 2 panes. We have our test fire on the right side and our question case on the left, right? And those are identified up in the upper portion, so you always know which one's which. I'm going to walk you through some of the controls here. Kind of right off the bat, one of the cool things is this reference guide that you can click. This is really beneficial for students, especially when they're just starting comparisons, as just a quick refresher of here's an image of a cartridge case, and we have the different areas and marks identified. Right? It's always really easy to jump back to the reference guide if you have a question about terminology or anything like that. So we're going to be focused on the comparisons I'm going to walk through on the breech face area and the shear marks, so the aperture shear marks in this particular region of the cartridge case. That's kind of what we're going to focus on today, but the other areas are identified there. So we can zoom these in a little bit. All right, we can tell up front, these kind of have the same general class characteristics. So I always teach class characteristics first. These are both 9mm. They are different brands of ammunition, which is why they look a little bit different. This is Remington, this is Federal. I do like to mix that in with students. Sometimes initially they would say these were fired by 2 different guns simply because the ammo is different. They don't really think about that until we kind of teach them, focus on the individual characteristics. All right, so we're going to ignore that the ammunition brand is different, but otherwise same general class characteristics, same general aperture shear shape with the rectangle, right? Same general firing pin impression shape. All right, we want to kind of focus on the individual characteristics. So one of the really cool things that you can do here, right? If you have a typical 2-dimensional picture, you can't change the lighting, right? And that's one of the most important parts to using a comparison scope is we can adjust the lighting to visualize marks a little bit differently, highlight marks better. So the Ballistics IQ, the way that the hardware actually images the case, it takes images with light at different positions, and we can now in the software switch between those. Right, so there are 5 different lighting positions that we can click through, and you can see as we do that, the marks kind of change in appearance as the light's coming in from a different angle or at a different direction. So for this first comparison here, I'm going to focus on the aperture shear marks. Right, these are Glock cartridge cases. the aperture shear tends to mark very well and be a very good area for comparison with all of these really nice fine strided marks. And I think for these two cases, the second light position, so position 2, actually kind of makes these appear the best out of those. We'll look at that again here in a second. All right, so I'm going to zoom them in, right, so you can kind of fill the frame a bit more with the aperture shear marks. And I'm going to move them to position them close to each other. Right, now you notice they move together, right? So I can move them, rotate them together, and they zoom together at the same rate. If we click this lock button down here at the bottom, I can now move them independently. So something I make sure to teach students is always zoom them locked so that they zoom together at the exact same rate. You don't want those to be zoomed differently, but otherwise you can kind of unlock it to move position. All right, so I'm going to align these here kind of at what would be the prism line on an actual comparison scope, right? And we're just simply going to try to find the best similarity we can with these strided marks in the aperture shear. All right, so I'm just going to position these a little bit, and I'm going to say maybe somewhere around here looks like maybe the best similarity we could see. We have a couple of marks that align here, but overall we have different patterns of those strided marks, right? And we can look at different lighting positions to make sure nothing really shows up differently here. I don't see anything that would contradict that. We kind of see a different pattern of marks, but we do have kind of a little bit of incidental similarity. So what I have my students do is I have them do these comparisons using the VCM portion, just like I did here. The next cool thing that you can do that's built into the Ballistics IQ software is the annotation tool. Right? So I'm going to go down here and click annotation tool down here towards the bottom. And it's essentially going to take a screenshot of that image, and it's going to put it in this kind of different viewer where we can annotate that image. So for the moment, I'm going to change the color up here on the color picker. I'm going to make this blue. Then I'm going to click the rectangle up here at the top, and I'm going to mark that this looks kind of similar. So I'm just going to draw on the image, and it's going to mark that, mark those to say that kind of looks a little bit similar. I'm then going to take the color picker, make this red. We have the rectangle selected, and I'm going to go through and maybe mark a few areas that that look a little bit different. Right, just to kind of illustrate, we see a lot of differences here, even though we have a couple of similarities, right? And it's pretty easy when you have a lot of parallel marks to force some of them to align and connect them, but that doesn't mean they were fired by the same gun, right? We have overwhelming dissimilarity here, which would support an elimination in this case. Up on the upper right, next to where it says annotation, there's a rename button. So I'm going to rename this aperture shear, just so I know what area I've compared there. And that now changes this tab up here. And on the next example, I'll go through a few different annotations so you can kind of see where this is beneficial. But it essentially names the annotation, so I kind of know what areas I've taken images of. And then the description box at the bottom, I'm just going to type aperture shear dissimilarity, right? Just to say, you could do a longer description there if you wanted, but just for kind of illustrative purposes here, we're going to say aperture shear dissimilarity, right? Overall, that supports an elimination. All right, when I'm done with that, I'm going to click finish. We're just going to click OK. It's saying it's applied the annotation successfully. It's going to click OK, go back to this view. So for this example, right, that's all I'm going to kind of go through for this one, right? That pretty well supports an elimination. We have some difference in aperture shear marks, right? We could try to align the aperture shear over on this side as well. We don't really see a whole lot of similarity here either. We also have a general kind of difference in what the breech face looks like. More parallel marks maybe on this one, more granular type marks on this one. The firing pin impressions also look a little bit different. So nothing really refutes the fact that this is an elimination, right? So we're going to call this an elimination. And what I'm going to do now is at the very bottom, there's an output report button, right? I'm going to click that output report. I'm going to make sure this is checked to add the annotation to the report because that's what we just annotated, right? The areas that we just marked. And I'm going to click export. Right, and it's going to create essentially a PDF report that pops up here. And this downloads straight to your computer. So you can always go to your computer, download files to find this. So I'm going to open this to show you kind of what it looks like. So this is actually really cool and something that when you're actually using a comparison microscope, maybe isn't quite so straightforward, especially for us. We don't have the software with a lot of the scopes. We just have kind of separate cameras attached to them. So when students do use the microscope, they have to take images themselves, put it into Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, make the annotations, and then essentially create a report, something similar to this. The Ballistics IQ does it for you, which is super nice. So we have our two cartridge cases. We have all the metadata. It shows the location of them. it shows the test fire and the question. Right, so we have this was a test fire case, this was a recover cartridge case. All the metadata is there. We even have the firearm information in with the test fire, Glock 19. You can put the serial number. Go down here, we can see the two images again. And if you keep scrolling, we can see the annotation with our description. All right, so whatever description you put and your annotation is there. And on the next example I walk through, we'll add a couple of annotations, and all of those will be placed here in this report. So it's a really professional looking report, right? These are actually used in the field. And then one nice thing that I tell students is to keep some of these examples. So if they want to become firearm examiners and go apply for a job, they can actually take some of these reports with them if they want to kind of demonstrate in an interview. Here's some of the comparison work that I've done, that you can identify individual characteristics, right? What they are, find similarities and differences, is a huge benefit to using this software and putting these really nice reports together, especially because this is a software and a system that's actually in use in the field. So all of that kind of provides a benefit over even using a comparison microscope in a sense. All right, so we're now going to go back to, see, I think I have the comparison viewer open. Okay, so I'm going to close this example. All right, so we made an elimination there. All right, now I'm back to my 3 cartridge cases, but we haven't looked at question cartridge case number 2 yet. All right, so I'm now going to deselect question 1 and make sure that I have test fire 1 and question 2 selected. Right, I'm going to go back to compare images. Right, it's going to load these. Right, it's going to show the same viewer that we looked at before, and I'm going to show you a couple of additional tools here for this example that's also really nice to be able to do through the software. Right, so we're going to zoom them in. I mentioned earlier to always make sure you're zooming with the controls locked. Right, if for some reason you accidentally do it, right, and zoom one by itself, there's always this reset button down here at the bottom left. It'll put them right back to how they were when they opened. Make sure you lock them, zoom them back in together. All right, so on the left, we have the test fire. So test fire 1 is on the left viewing pane, and question 2 is on the right viewing pane. Right, same kind of example. Class characteristics are the same here. We want to focus on individual characteristics. Right, I'm going to jump to the aperture shear area on both of these cases, just like we did on the last example. All right, so we're going to zoom this in and move these over. Right, and try to align them. Right. Maybe see some better similarity here than we saw with the previous example. Okay, off to a good start, right? If we're kind of trying to identify these, we're going to go through the different lighting positions, right? And see if we can make them look a little bit better, right? I think kind of at this point, you should be able to kind of see that similarity in these, but we might be able to make it look a little bit better, right? Changing that light position. Again, something you can't do on a traditional 2-dimensional image, but we can do through the software. So go to position 2. I think maybe that looks a little bit better, and in this area at least, this is a bit washed out. That's okay. Maybe one of the other angles shows that a bit better. And position 5 shows a lot of similarity down here. Right, so those are, this looks to be a good alignment, and we have kind of good visualization combining these 2 light positions. So same thing we did before. I'm going to take this. I'm going to go down to my annotation tool, on the bottom right. Okay, we can see that similarity there. I'm going to make the box blue because we're showing a similar region. I'm just going to draw a single box around all of this, right? And I make sure to have my students draw these boxes too to really indicate, if you're showing this image, I have them approach it as if they were in court, right, and have to defend this to somebody. You want to make sure you're drawing attention to a specific area, right? Don't let somebody interpret what you're trying to show. Make sure you actually tell them what you want to show. So I have them do the annotation, and I'm going to put aperture shear similarity. Again, just a basic description, just so something's there. You could obviously do something a little bit different. I'm going to go up to the rename on the top right here, and I'm going to call this AS1, just for aperture shear image 1. We're going to apply that. Click finish. It's just saying that it has successfully applied the annotation. That's good. I'm now going to go and change my lighting to position 5, where I can see all of this. And I'm going to add a second annotation. Right, so I'm going to click the annotation tool again. It's going to screenshot this. I'm going to click this little plus button up here on the top right. Right, that's going to add this. It's going to have me make a name. So I'm going to do AS2. Click OK. Right, it's now added my second aperture shear image.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go through with the blue, right, rectangle. Same thing we did before. And again, just for the example, I'm just going to highlight all of that. Right, you could draw smaller individual boxes around individual strided marks, similar to what we did in the elimination example. But again, for the example, I'm just going to do a bigger box around all of them. Right, I can do here, we have just say more aperture shear similarity. Right, so we can add that description down there. Again, you could be more descriptive if you like, or if you're teaching students, you could have them be more descriptive, kind of tell them what you want them to talk about down there. I'm going to click finish. So it's applied that annotation as well. Generally for my students for these examples, I like to tell them to find at least 2 different areas on a cartridge case when they're doing a comparison. So I don't want them to just focus on the aperture shear for every single cartridge case. I want them to use the aperture shear and the breech face, or maybe aperture shear and firing pin, or breech face and firing pin, to kind of make them look for different regions and not always only look in one spot. So if we were to look at the breech face here, they're pretty granular. It can be tough sometimes to see the similarity in those patterns there. So one cool thing that you can do here is if I go to the very bottom, there's a little wrench icon. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to bring up these little properties tabs at the bottom. And I'm going to click adjust. Doesn't matter which one I click it on, but I'm going to click adjust. And it's going to bring up this pane that lets you add color filters. You can do some sharpening, so some basic image adjustment. You can add brightness, contrast, make the images grayscale if you want to remove the color. That could be helpful if you're comparing ammunition of different materials and you want the appearance to kind of be the same. But this inversion tool is really helpful, and students really seem to like this. So I'm going to click invert, kind of flips the contrast, gives the cartridge case a little bit of a different look. At the bottom here, I'm going to click apply to all first gallery images and second. So I want this to apply to both cartridge cases, to all images. I'm going to click apply, and in the VCM viewer, it's going to change the appearance of those. Right, so now I can kind of do that comparison with the contrast inverted, gives kind of a different look to them. Right, I can then go through the different light positions, and different characteristics may jump out. The aperture shear actually sticks out very well like this. And I think here, again, for this example, if we go, there's some of these granular marks that become very apparent, I think, with this inverted contrast under light position 2 that maybe weren't quite as visible before. The firing pins here don't show any kind of weird characteristics, but sometimes this is very helpful for the firing pins too. Students really like this for the firing pin. So I'm going to go through for this example. I'm going to look at this region here. We're going to push these together. Right, and this kind of cluster of granular characteristics looks pretty similar. And if I move along the cases, we can kind of see similarity between this region of those granular marks and this region. All right, so I'm going to just do one of those, just as kind of the last annotation example here. We're going to click annotate. We're going to click the little plus tab at the top. We're going to say this is BF1, and I'm going to write inverted, just so we know that's an inverted contrast. Right, and it's going to show that inverted contrast. Right, that's the annotation that's going to be there. So I'm going to do the same thing, blue, apply, and I'm just going to draw a big box for the moment around those. Okay, we can just say breech face similarity. Then I'm going to click finish, just saying it's applied to the report. Okay. I'm going to go back to adjust. We can then reset both of these. So we're going to do first gallery and second gallery images, both cases, reset. Apply to all of them, click OK, and it's going to take us back to our kind of initial view there. So we have 3 images here of annotated similarities, no major differences that we really looked at. This all kind of supports an identification. I'm then going to click on the output report. Yes, I want the annotations. We're going to export this, and it's going to pull up that PDF, same as it did last time. Again, this goes straight to your downloads folder on your computer, so if you close out of the software, you can always get back to these. Just on your computer. So same thing here. We have the same kind of report, right? We have our test fire and our question, all the metadata is down here, right? Which is really nice. We have our 2 cartridge cases there that we looked at. And now we're going to see all of our annotations. So we have the aperture shear 1, we have our aperture shear 2, right? Lots of really good similarity there for those. And if we keep going down, we have our inverted image here too that shows the breech face similarity. Right, so all really cool things that you can do, makes it really easy to add these to the report. Students really like this, creating the reports in this way. It's less manual work for them having to jump between different software programs and images. Everything's all together right here. Makes it really easy for students to do comparisons and kind of learn how to put together reports. Because if they do a bunch of these, right, they're kind of learning how a report should be set up or could be set up that they can then apply later if they're doing something outside of the Ballistics IQ software. Right? They can set up the reports kind of in the same way. Right? They learn how to do annotations, how to add descriptions to make sure that you're describing what you're actually trying to show in those images, and lay the report out in a way that's really easy to digest and easy to comprehend and show somebody. So that's generally how I use the software here to get students that one-on-one time with with comparisons. Then the last thing I'll just mention here before I turn it over to Rachel is that this software is really nice because it just runs in a web browser, right? So we're just doing this in Google Chrome. You don't have to have a specific operating system. It doesn't matter if a student has a Windows PC or a Mac. A lot of students now just like to use tablets like iPads. You can do all this on an iPad, right? You open your web browser, load it in, and it works perfectly fine. I do recommend students use a mouse, makes things much easier to control, but you basically can do this across any computer, any operating system. So I assign a lot of this work to be outside of class, so I can focus in class on things that we need to be in the lab for. I can cover additional topics, and I can assign this to them. I'm obviously around to help them if they need it, but they can do most of this comparison work kind of on their own at home as a homework assignment, and we can spend more time in class getting to additional topics rather than having to spend multiple class periods letting them just do comparisons. If they had to do them using a comparison scope, that just gets a little bit difficult to do. So a lot of benefits to using the software for those purposes. All right, so just to kind of reiterate here, so test fire 1 to question 1, we eliminated. Test fire 1 to question 2, we identified to the same Glock 19. And Rachel's going to kind of show some of the investigative stuff, which is really cool, that students really like to use in the software also. All right, so I will stop sharing, and I will turn it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Eric. Hopefully everyone's like super excited. I heard someone go, ooh, when you were showing them how to kind of add images, which was really cool. So yeah, I'm just going to share with you a little bit about our next scenario. So Eric's already shown you kind of how to use ballistics IQ in that virtual comparison microscopy mode. And absolutely exactly like Eric said, the way in which I use BIQ is exactly for that purpose. We also do kind of a lot of work outside the classroom, particularly for assessment preparation and things like that. But I also use it inside the classroom so that we don't have to specifically be in a lab. You can literally be in any lecture theatre or wherever the student happens to have Wi-Fi connection, basically, which I think is another really, really good thing because it reduces our health and safety requirements and things like that as well, which is really fun. And a lot less risk assessment work. So when I teach my undergraduate students, these are usually third-year students, and they often have very little prior knowledge of firearms, if any. Most of them will never have handled a gun because I'm based in the UK, and these kinds of firearms, semi-automatic, self-loading pistols, things like that, are completely prohibited in the UK. And I often have about 40 students of our 100 or so in the usual cohort each year. And so because we have a National Ballistics Intelligence Service, a little bit like in the US, where we have an intelligence link with our forensic examinations and firearms investigations, I like them to also be aware of exactly how, beyond the laboratory, policing and forensic science link together and how important they are for really rapid information, rapid intelligence, rapid reports, or potential links between one crime scene and another crime scene, for example. So maybe we suspect that there's an organized gang or there's a criminal that has a firearm and they're using it to commit multiple crimes, shoot at multiple scenes, and police officers need that information as fast as physically possible, usually within that golden hour kind of time period. And they really want to know, is this one firearm responsible for a shooting in location A and a shooting in location B, wherever those locations might be? So they might be quite close together. few streets away. They might be countries apart. They might be absolutely massive distance between them. And so the second kind of scenario is a little bit of a local one. So we're looking at another shooting, again in the city of Livermore in California. This time, unfortunately, it's a fatal shooting. 16-year-old boy has been killed basically in a drive-by shooting. The map that you can see on there demonstrates up at the top. I don't know if you can see my little mouse there, but that's where, unfortunately, one fired cartridge case was recovered next to the injured party, the victim, the boy, and then an abandoned car, which is suspected of being involved in that drive-by shooting. 2 fired cartridge cases are found a few roads down that we are now potentially interested with. So also you can link this to CCTV footage and other pieces of information from witnesses that may be made up or not. I like to base my cases on real cases and do some fictitious kind of alterations. So this is a real case that I found online in the news reports. And so what I want to know is the same gun responsible for firing the cartridge cases at the scene where the boy was located and where the fired cartridge cases from the footwell of the recovered and abandoned car. In this particular case, no firearms were recovered, and therefore what we do is we perform an open case file check, or an OCF. And this basically says, you know, I want to look at all the fired cartridge cases that I have collected in my agency, so relatively local, you know, maybe 50 miles, 100 miles, depends on, you know, how big or small your agency is. And I'm going to run, with the BIQ software, a potential link search. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. Give me a moment to switch screens here. So hopefully everyone can see this screen. So this is just our normal search gallery, which is exactly what you were looking at with Eric. This time I've put up here the case number for this particular incident, so on the 13th of August, so yesterday. And this time I've got one cartridge case from what I'm calling scene A, and we've got CCTV evidence that links the car leaving the scene. There's footage there, and we know that the vehicle that was abandoned and found in that car park was in fact the same firearm, but we don't know whether the cartridge cases in that car are definitively used with that and linked to that same one. So we've got these 2 cartridge cases below here. So what we can now do is we can use BIQ to say, okay, tell me how many guns were involved in these 2 scenes. So we can select all of them. We can select all on this page, and then we can run a CSA report, so a crime scene analysis report. And the more guns you have selected, the longer this will take. So hence the reason we're doing a relatively small number here. But, you know, Eric and I have done crime scene analysis reports with over 100 different cartridge cases in our crime scene analysis triage reports. So what we can see here is we're saying ballistics IQ, so the algorithm that works within the software, is saying we think that with high confidence, all of these 3 cartridge cases are attributed to the same firearm. So we've put in the known caliber, so we know it's 9mm Luger ammunition for all 3 fired cartridge cases. So the ballistics IQ software is also suggesting that the next part of the process, if we were in a real agency, would be to select the best cartridge case from our 3 to be taken forward for 3D imaging, which we aren't going to cover, but that's what this NIBIN is. This is the US's national database to compare fired cartridge cases, fired bullets, etc. So we're going to focus on this one. It's identified as NIBIN, or most suitable for entry into NIBIN. And what we can do is we can right click on that particular image, that particular cartridge case, and it comes up with search potential link. Please do someone tell me if you can't see this pop-up screen, but hopefully that should be fine. So we literally just click on that button. And what it will do is it will have a think about it, and we will see our additional window pop up. Again, hopefully everyone can see this. And what you've got here is a search function. So this allows you to not only search in your own agency, but this allows you to search between different agencies. So for speed and the time in which it might take, because, as Eric mentioned earlier, sometimes our breech face characteristics might look granular, sometimes they might look parallel. I'm changing this to say everything, but these Glock firing pins, this elliptical shape is quite kind of like indicative of the Glock firing Glock firearm. So I'm going to keep elliptical here. It's going to, again, narrow my search and speed things up a little bit. We can then suggest, do I want to look at the top 10 in my database? Do I want to look at top 50 all the way to a top 1,000? Again, it's going to take longer the more you ask it to think about. So I'm going to keep with top 10, and I'm just going to search in my agency. Okay, but we do have the potential to search other crime scenes, other databases, if we so wish to. Then we're going to generate a report or a search result, basically. There is an aspect of auditing where we can also enter the case information. So in particular, we were looking at scene B, and then I'm going to do that open case file check. Again, it might take a minute to think about it. That algorithm is working in the background, but again, everything is browser based. But you see, not to happened really quite quickly. And so what you can see here, I'm going to make these a little bit smaller just so that you can see it all on one screen, is we've got our top 10 rankings. So ranking in position 1, this is our cartridge case that we asked Ballistics IQ's potential link search to search against. Okay, and then it's identified the other 9 fire cartridge cases in the database that actually it thinks are linked together. So this isn't saying these are linked together. This is just the database saying, of everything that is in my database, these are the top 10 closest cartridge cases that the algorithm has established. Okay, so it then is up to you as an individual, as a firearms examiner, i.e. a student, to then do that comparison work exactly in the way that Eric showed you earlier. So you can click on these 2 cartridge cases because you want to see whether the marks on this particular fired cartridge case from actually a different case. So this is Eric's case right here, the second cartridge case from Eric's scene, which was 3 days earlier, same city of Livermore. It is actually linked to the scenario of the 16-year-old fatal killing as well. So we can then generate and compare images. And this brings up that virtual comparison microscope exactly the same as Eric talked you through. So I'm not going to cover that element of using the VCM. But what I am going to show you is, say we've zoomed in, we've identified some features for comparison. I'm just going to move them around a bit. We've got this button down the bottom called Verify. So I think this is really useful from an instructor's point of view as well, because what this enables us to do is if we click Verify, we can generate a report, a potential link report, we can click that verify button, and we can say, you know, what is our report name? So we're going to say 0813B, potential link to 2025 0810 OCF check. And we can again put a standard report that suggests, once we've done our comparison, whether we think that there's marks that are indicating the two fired cartridge cases are from the same gun or they aren't, we can then use the BIQ's standard verbiage to actually edit and put that information into our report as well. So in this case, say I've done that comparison, I'm going to say there's a potential link found, and we can add that comment in. I can then say item number 1, taking it from up here, in case 2025 0813B is associated with item number 1, or whatever. I think, yeah, I've managed to click on the same one in my in my demonstration, but the same applies. You can add your name in, etc., and click save. And what this will then do is it will generate a report that then you can access, or your student can access, and you can then compare some of those features as well. So I'll just let it think about itself, and I'll show you where that can be found. So here are all of our potential link ranks. We can also click map it, which enables us to actually see where our cartridge cases are actually located geographically in relation to each other, which is really nice. So we can see the proximity, how far apart these shootings potentially were. So if we head back to our home screen, we can see our little button here called the Rapid Ballistics Reports. So if we click on this here, we should now find a potential link report that's been generated and saved that we can then click on, and we can download the report. So again, that's going to generate a PDF that you can then utilize. So that could be submitted as an assignment, etc. So we can then save it there. The other thing that we can also do is we can save our CSA report. Come back. Oh. Having a little bit of a hissy fit, changing window. There we go. So we can also save our crime scene analysis reports. So we can save them as a PDF, which is using this button here, which is great for students. But if we want to do something, we want to check something and we want to come back to it later, we can use the send report function. And again, that enables us to create a CSA report that we can come back to and literally just click save, and then that will enable us to see our CSA report, which is an example that you've got here. So where you've got a CSA report that's saved, it comes up here as report type CSA. Where it's a potential link report, you can see it here. So you can always then go back to those potential reports and look at them later. So I think that's also a really useful tool from an instructor's perspective, that you can then also use maybe if you want the students to conduct a peer review process or something like that as well. So they're kind of the main ways that we're utilising sort of ballistics IQ for looking at both the forensic examination and comparison work, as well as looking at more of the investigative tools and the potential for students to think about the movement of firearms, the use of firearms, and how forensic firearms examiners are using both the comparison microscope and these triage tools such as BIQ to be able to provide rapid information, rapid intelligence back to police forces to help them to narrow their search or to help them to link cases together, to pool resources so that you don't have two police teams working on two different cases and not communicating. And we can also do this in order to look for potential links also between different countries. So if I also think about and I go back to our case, what we can also see is that do a report and search potential link. But yeah, you can do it with one fired cartridge case as well. You don't have to do it with multiple. When we go back to that potential link report, what we can also do is see whether this is not coming back to previous. Sorry, this is my computer. It's because I've got many bits of software open at the moment. It's struggling in the heat in the UK at the moment. So if I do back to agency search, then we can also look at what were the other cases that were in that top 10. And again, we can continue doing that search, and we can use the VCM. And what we can also do, we can look at the scores. So these are like how similar is, what's that comparison between the fired cartridge case in our scene and another cartridge case that's in our database. We can actually see that these might be linking to other crimes in other countries. So if we were actually to search another agency in the UK, for example, we can also go into that particular case incident. So say we had intelligence that the firearm has been used in previous crimes few years earlier, something like that. It will also suggest that this particular firearm has been used in multiple geographic locations. So there's loads of potential opportunities to create new and interesting scenarios for our students to work through. And you may even use the same fired cartridge cases and just change the scenario, change the number of fired cartridge cases from one group of students to the next as well. So there's really loads of opportunities to kind of create those interconnectivities. And Eric and I have even been talking about how do we potentially think about creating scenarios where the students are going to search across agencies so that they can they don't have any idea that it's going to potentially link to a scene, you know, in another country. So in terms of the ballistics IQ software, they hopefully have been able to give you some ideas and inspirations of how to use the tools. But the last kind of piece of software that I wanted to introduce you to, that again, Eric and I both utilize, is something called World of Guns. And particularly this is because we use this particular software to help students really get their heads inside firearms in a really safe and secure manner. So I'm just going to share my screen to show you that. So this is a free piece of software. It's actually a game, but you can use it absolutely for educational purposes. And I have an educational license for this. And as you can see, there's lots and lots of different guns. But the beauty of this particular piece of kit, and I know the guy that has designed this software, is that they actually use real blueprints, the original technical specifications, the technical blueprints, in order to create these 3D models that you can actually interact with. So I'm going to choose our Glock 19 because that was the firearm we used in both Eric and I's scenarios. And what you can actually do is you can use this software so that the students can field strip it, they can disassemble it, they can put it back together, they can look at how it operates. So, I mean, there's a whole ton of stuff. You can either order some 3D printed replicas of certain firearms from the company. I can't do that because it doesn't comply with our laws. But in the US, certain states, you might be absolutely fine. So make sure you look at the legislation before doing that. But we're just going to quickly look at operation and some of the really useful learning tools that this software enables you to look at. So again, all entirely from the student's computer, they can download it straight to their device from the website. You can show it the firearm being unloaded, and so fired. You can show it reloading. So you take a magazine in and out. You can show it firing. Obviously, this is all in relatively real time, but some of the great options are actually up at this top here. And you can slow everything down. So we really love a ×50. And when you do the firing, now it goes at a much slower rate. And you can start to pause it. You can talk through, you can point to different things. You can rotate these firearms around. So it's not just a static video that you might have found on YouTube or something like that. Not only that, you can actually view it in X-ray mode. And this is where we get sort of really excited. And there are different levels of X-ray depending on what bits of the firearm you actually want the students to see or to learn about, or you want to show them. And so there are certain parts like your recoils, guide springs, looking at your firing pin safeties, the follower within the magazine, all of your ammunition inside your magazine, and an ejected cartridge case, for example. Additionally, you've got your trigger, and in the case of the Glock, this internal trigger, so that acts as a safety as well. So if this inner bit isn't depressed, again, it's not going to fire. So again, in this mode, you can move it all around as well. So it's really, really useful and interactive. And then likewise, you've then got your extractor here so that you, again, can enable the students to see how different parts actually engage with the different areas of the ammunition and create those striated marks in the case of the extractor creating extractor marks. For example, you've also then got the shape of your firing pin in here that is the right shape, design, measurement for the Glock 19. Again, so many different options of how to utilize that. You've also got the option here for parts names. And so you can, when you've clicked on that, you can actually hover over the different parts and it'll tell the student what their parts are called. So this is the barrel, this is your firing pin, that's the firing pin safety, your extractor, etc. And again, when you do fire, speed it up a little bit. get them to press the trigger. And again, you can see how different parts might work. You can also click on some of the parts and get it to fire in that way too. So some really, really interesting ways to actually help students learn in a very hands-on interactive mode, as well as an instructor and, and as a tutor being able to demonstrate things to them. This enables them to really engage with how those marks are being generated on the fired cartridge case. Usually a little bit more useful than looking at the projectile and the fired marks that the rifling creates on a fired bullet, for example. This is something that Eric and I will use usually at the start of our course to help students get familiar with terminology and get used to the different parts, how they work. And then once they've got that familiarity in this safe space, we can then move into them handling those actual firearms in the classroom, making them more aware of actually the weight of them, how they smell, how much force you might need to actually operate them, and those kinds of things. So, another, again, really accessible piece of software for both you as tutors and for the students as well. So hopefully, unless Eric, there's anything that you wanted to particularly sort of add that I hadn't covered and you utilize in your teaching.
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, as far as World of Guns go, just the operating mechanisms and the disassembly stuff. Yeah. And the disassembly, just to briefly touch on, it kind of guides you through like what part to click on first. So you can actually turn on hints. So it'll tell you, here's the first pin that you take out, then you take out this pin, then you take this part off. Or you can turn the hints off, and then you have to click the correct part before it'll actually do that part of the disassembly. So it really can walk you through, but you can also do it in a sense of like, if you just had the actual gun, you wouldn't have that help, and you can do it that way also. But
Yeah,
the operating
definitely.
mechanisms are incredible. I do a lot of screen captures of them, of different guns with the slow-mo firing going, and then I can put those up on slides in class and kind of walk through them. It's a fantastic tool.
Yeah, definitely. Scott, I noticed you put a question around gaining access to World of Guns. To be quite honest, I would suggest that people just download it straight from the website, the software, because what I find is then you get the student's view and you know exactly which guns the students can actually access. Because the problem that I find with the instructor view is that you don't know when things have changed from the student's perspective, and it might be that certain models of gun may or may not be available to them, or they may have to do more of the gameplay before they get to access that side of things. So at least as a student, you're always aware of how to use it, but it is always free. So I don't fully know. Eric, have you got the educational view?
No, so I didn't know about that. I got it in grad school, and it's through a gaming software, the way I did it, through Steam. They like host a lot of different games, and you can find it there. And there was a free
the link in the chat.
Yeah, and there was a free version, but you had to, like Rachel said, you have to like play the games to like get points to unlock things kind of. But I think the all access pass was like $50, and it's a lifetime license, and you get all new guns that they add. So I have that I bought, I mean, probably, I don't know, 10 years ago or 8 years ago, and I still use that, and you get all new models that they add. And they do routinely add new models of firearms. So I don't have students pay for it. I demonstrated, just kind of showing the videos in class, because I try not to have students pay for things if I don't have to. So the education way that Rachel's talking about would be great, so that they could get a free version of it, and then you could design labs for like them to actually do around that.
Yeah, so I just literally use I think the Glock 19 is the first firearm that they unlock. So I think to unlock the Glock, I think they literally, all they need to do is, I need to double check it because obviously start of the new academic year, but I'm pretty sure last year, all they had to do was go through the tutorial. that gave them the points, which also taught them how to use the software, which then reduced the amount of time we wasted in the classroom because they already knew how to do it. They'd already downloaded the software. It was then about actually going through how the gun worked, and then they could do it while I was demoing it to them. The other way people have done it is they have tablets that they use in the lab, for example, and so they're already pre-downloaded and set up so that the students can come in and use them. So there are different kind of approaches to using sort of World of Guns in the completely free way.
Thank you both. I'm looking at the clock and it looks like we're about 8 minutes over, and I'm going to give you both the perfect score from my perspective.
We're at 4 my time.
And the only person that dropped told me that she was dropping and she had to drop. I'm looking in the chat for questions. Dr. Eric Warren in Tennessee has posted a link in the chat if anyone wants to grab that. Thank you, Eric. Can I reach out to you on behalf of any of the people that are here at any point and put you in touch with them if they need to speak with you or get a clarification point?
Absolutely.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like this community to, at least feel comfortable to be able to reach out to one another. And with the idea that perhaps you can do, as you had described, California could search a Florida case in the academic world and things of that nature. So I know it's late for you, Rachel, and I know it's early for our West Coasters. So we will wrap it up. I'm just going to pause just for a minute and give you essentially a virtual standing ovation. Because if I did a literal standing ovation, you'll see that I'm wearing shorts. But it's going to be 99 here in Florida today, which is 37 for you, Rachel, or maybe even 38.
That's
so
hot.
let me check I think we're good on questions. Thanks again for everyone that could make it. We did hit our attendance mark, and we will make this available for review, and we'll just keep pressing forward. So everybody have a great rest of the week. And that's all from here. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
All righty. Bye-bye.